Today we will reconvene our inquiry, and this is its third public hearing on the issue of commercial banking fees in Trinidad and Tobago. The first hearing was held on Friday, February 17th, with the Central Bank, and the second hearing was held on Friday, May the 5th, 2017, with the Bankers Association. At this time, I'd like to welcome representatives of First Citizens Bank and Republic Bank Limited. At this time, I'd also like to invite guests to introduce themselves.
Jacqueline Kwamina. I'm an Executive Director and General Counsel at Republic Bank Limited.
Good morning, Nigel Batiste, Managing Director of Republic Bank Limited and President of Republic Financial Holdings Limited.
Morning, Karen DeBasey, Group CEO of First Citizens Bank.
Hi, good morning, Jason Julian, Deputy CEO of Business Generation, First Citizens.
Good morning, I'm Lindy Balatal, Head Legal Compliance Governance at First Citizens.
I am Michael Coppin, and I am the Vice Chairman, and today I will be sitting in the chair due to Senator Choate, Senior Counsel's absence. At this time, I'd like to invite members to reintroduce themselves.
Clarence Rambarat, member.
Prakash Ramada, member.
Lovell Francis, member.
At this time, it's meet to remind all concerned of the 6 objectives of this inquiry. First being to determine the rationale for the fee structure observed by commercial banks in Trinidad and Tobago. 2, to determine the feasibility of state involvement in the regulation of commercial banking fees in Trinidad and Tobago. To determine the possible effects of unregulated fees on consumer welfare. Number 4, to determine the possible instances of anti-competitive behaviors by commercial banks with respect to fees. Number 5, to ascertain the amount of profits made by commercial banks per year due to the changes in fees over the last 10 years. And finally, number 6, to ascertain the trends in banking fees charges in Trinidad and Tobago in the last 10 years. I would like to ask the officials of RBL and FCB to make any brief opening remarks, and in particular, starting with Mr. Nigel Batiste of RBL.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is our pleasure once again to be here, right, to hopefully finally clarify any remaining outstanding issues that the committee may have.
And Mrs. Karen DeBasey.
Good morning again. As First Citizens, we're happy to be here today. I think that this exercise is very important to promote the public awareness of the fees and charges and education of the composition of fees and charges. And just to advise, we recognize our role as the majority state-owned financial institution and as an entity quoted on the stock exchange for our stakeholders, which are the public of Trinidad and Tobago in both instances. So we're here to answer the questions that we can within the confines of the regulations.
Great. At this time, due to Member Ramada's impending departure, I will ask him to lead off any examination. I would ask that officials direct, and members as well, their questions and concerns through the chair. I would also ask members and officials to kindly activate their microphones when recognized by the chair and to turn it off when you're finished. So, Mr. Ramada.
Thank you very much. Good morning and welcome again. Let's start with Republic to begin with, and the questions, of course, will apply to both Republic and FCB. Could you give us, for the last 3 years, what your profit, your indicated profits would have been, declared profits, for the last 3 years, first of all? And Also, could you tell us in the last 3 years whether you have increased any bank fee whatsoever and what they are? And then we'll take it from there.
Is the question relating to Republic Bank in Trinidad or Republic Financial Holdings Limited?
Well, let's have both.
Okay. For Republic Financial Holdings Limited, the profitability over the last 3 years, in 2016, the profitability was just under $1 billion. In 2015, it was $1.2 billion. And in 2014, it was around the same $1.2 billion. So that would have been Republic Financial Holdings Limited. The operations in Trinidad and Tobago, which are also reported publicly, would have had profitability in 2016 of $624 million, but in 2015 and 2014, the numbers would not have been as readily available because, as you may recall, towards the end of 2015, we did a restructuring of the group, which is what established Republic Financial Holdings Limited and Republic Bank Limited. So you'd really only see the separate number for Republic Bank Limited in 2016, which would have been the $624 million. Insofar as whether any fees had been increased over the last 3 years, I really cannot say specifically. I know that the bank would have introduced a number of new products, all of which would have attracted no fees, which would have been our mobile banking and our internet banking solutions. But the decision with respect to the movement in fees is really a decentralized decision that's really based on a number of factors, most of which we would have communicated previously to the committee.
Well, you appreciate, well, let me ask you a question. Do you appreciate the level of animosity in the general public towards banks generally in relation to the fees that have been whether applied recently or in the past? Are you aware of a high level of animosity in the population?
I'm not aware of a high level of animosity. I know there is some significant concern among the general public and certainly among our own clients. And the bank does annual surveys to try and identify what might be the pain points that our clients have. And we do respond to those pain points. So a pain point, for example, a few years ago, might have been the accessibility to some of these services and the cost of the accessibility. What the bank would do in response to that was to see how we could actually design and implement new products or new solutions that would minimize those costs to the client.
Yes. But let's go back to the issue of fees. You're saying as you are here today, you're not aware that there's animosity generally in the public in relation to bank fees?
I'm not aware of a high level of animosity.
You're aware of what, a moderate level?
I would say that there's concern, which is the word I used previously.
Now, let's go to animosity.
Mm-hmm.
Are you aware of any level of animosity towards the banks?
I would say no.
Thank you very much. Now, having said that, then I find it very strange because I'm a member of Parliament and many complain to me, and you've seen it in the media. And you, I'm sure, through your public relations department, will try to get some level of feedback from the population. And it has not come to your attention that there's, and I use the word now, anger towards the bank in relation to bank fees?
Yes, as I said, I would say there are very strong words that are being used by yourself, animosity and anger. We are aware that our clients remain concerned over the level of fees. We do everything that we can possibly do to redirect our clients to show them the options that are available with respect to the payment of fees. And we are satisfied that once we are able to communicate and clarify, that the clients do understand. So I will have to say I'm not aware that it's anger and animosity. Those are words that I would definitely.
Of course, you're entitled to not be aware. Yeah. In relation to, on the last occasion, we spoke about CSR, corporate social responsibility. Do you have any sense from the feedback that you have received that persons find it difficult to accept the level of fees which are charged, and at the same time banks posting, and in particular Republic, where we start here, very high levels of profitability? And we have no problem with profitability, but you do appreciate that the fees are discretionary and that to maintain a high level of profitability, or if you wish to lower your level of profitability, you can adjust your fees. Do you?
Well, I mean, obviously, if you want to maintain a certain level of profitability, there are a number of variables
Yes.
that go into that equation. But you started with reference to the corporate social responsibility. Republic Bank, I think, is very renowned in Trinidad for our corporate social responsibility programs.
Yes.
You know, we expend over $20 million annually. And that is really just directly from the centralized location. That doesn't take into account all of the other activities. With respect to the implications for fees versus profitability, I mean, an analysis of the contribution of the fees to the bank's profitability will show that the fees actually account for a very small portion of the total income earned by the bank. And I mean, one of the main drivers of our fee structure is really the cost of providing the services. And you will actually see that as we are able to redirect our clients into alternative channels or alternative products, the relationship is that the fee might actually go down, but the operating expenses go down a little bit more. So that from a profitability point of view, your profitability might actually improve.
All right, great. Now, having said what you told us just now, it's a very small percentage of your profitability. What
Small
is
percentage
that-
of the income. Yeah.
Of the income. What is that percentage?
Okay, so in the case of, let's use Republic Bank because we want to talk about the Trinidad operations. In the case of the Trinidad operations, we need to make a distinction among the different types of fees. The fee that we are aware that the clients have most concerns over really are the fees that are related to the actual account operations or transactions on the account. In the case of Republic Bank in Trinidad, those fees actually account for 7% of the total income, okay, which would be roughly around, so those fees account for maybe about 10% of the bank's profitability.
10%.
10 or 11%.
We heard 7, we hear in 10, 11. Which?
No, because they're different numbers. I mean, 7% of the income.
Yes.
You know, then when you take out the expenses, etc., and you come out to the profitability, if you just apply the fee income to the profitability number, it goes up to about 11%.
11%.
Yeah.
Well, this is a self-evident question, the answer in it, but it is within your remit then to adjust your fees way down, having regard to the small percentage that it would affect your profitability.
It is.
Would you consider that?
No.
Why?
Because as I said, I mean, there are a number of variables that go into the determination of a fee. And the most important of which really is the operating cost associated with providing the service. So that what Republic Bank does, you know, is that we look at the cost of providing the service and we seek to see whether there's a balance between what we can recover from the cost of that service and what we can offer in terms of alternative channels. If the banks were to remove the fees associated with all of the services, then what you may very well find yourself happening is where the most expensive services and products that are offered by the bank are, in fact, the same, you earn the same revenue as the least expensive products and services offered by the bank. In which case then, from a client perspective, there's no real distinction between which direction or which option they should utilize. So that from the bank's perspective, you have a situation where it is a suboptimal decision making on the part of the client. I mean, if Republic Bank is offering, right, mobile banking using your internet, using your smartphone or internet banking free, and clients can in fact do all of their transactions, non-cash, right, through that channel, and you're offering also the physical transaction which is coming into the branch, right, which has a much higher cost to the organization free, then from a client perspective, you know, it makes no difference which one we use, but from the organization's perspective, having invested all of the technology and all of the capital into the mobile and internet banking solutions, you end up in a situation where, you know, as a country and as an organization, you're not moving forward because from a client perspective, it's the same cost.
Yeah. You do appreciate there are different levels of socioeconomic clientele that you would have, educational, cultural, and a host of other factors.
I do appreciate that, but we also appreciate that first of all, the mobile...
But I finish the question.
Okay, sorry.
And there are those who will find, for instance, e-banking completely alien and therefore unavailable, and therefore are in a position where they have no choice in their circumstances but to be victimized in their mind by these fees.
So I do appreciate that there really would be a victimization in their mind. From the bank's perspective, we know that the smartphone penetration in this country is extremely high. The internet banking penetration in Trinidad and Tobago is also extremely high. What we have found is that the greatest resistance to the use of electronic channels has tended to go in the demographic, from a demographic perspective, but even that has been evolving over the last, I would say, certainly year, 18 months. So more and more clients, once they understand, are quite ready to adopt the newer technologies.
Yeah, and that proves the point that yes, you have success in relation to that because it's far more convenient for a person who is well entrenched with technology to move across. But we're speaking now about the average 65-year-old woman from Rio Claro, as my friend from Rio Claro will reference, who has never even had a smartphone, as one example. And that is a person at the end of the day who really would be faced, from what you have told us, unavoidably with these fees.
Well, I wouldn't want to generalize to all the 65-year-olds, okay, because...
No, well, listen, I know you do not wish to generalize, but I live in the real world, and I know exactly who I'm speaking about. And every MP who has any interface with the public will tell you there are many like that. Of course, there's no generalization. There are people in their 90s who are very articulate technologically.
Correct.
So,
correct.
But I'm dealing with real-world examples. So are you saying that you're unaware of that large number of persons who will not be able to access these services for free?
So we also deal with real-world situations.
Yes.
I mean, we interact with our clients every day. So I am aware that there are clients who choose, and really, as I said, we started off demographically,
yes,
and then it has migrated really to just personal preferences, that you would prefer not to use the online channel or the internet banking channel, which I think is a fair option on the part of the individual. But to say that, from a real-world perspective,
yes,
there are so many people who have no choice but to not use their electronic channels, I think that is too much of a generalization.
Really?
Okay.
Sorry.
Member Lovell Francis.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Mr. Batiste.
Good morning.
You responded to Member Ramadar's question about the nature of the fees by saying that they are a decentralized decision. Could you clarify what that means? Because I could interpret that to mean that every manager determines what the fee structure should be for an individual bank, which sounds like a recipe for chaos. So could you clear up that, and then I'll ask.
So what I meant by that, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to clarify it, because your interpretation would have been incorrect. What I meant by that is that these fees or these services are generated by various areas in the organization. And in Republic Bank, we have a structure with a number of general managers who are responsible for various lines of business. And these general managers, to a very large extent, would review and recommend, and it would actually be approved, not necessarily having to emanate all the way up to the executive directors for approval. But there's not a situation where individual branch managers or individual staff are able to actually determine that the fee should be X or Y. It's actually done in a structured way, but it's done because of our structure where we have general managers who are responsible for commercial and retail banking, who are responsible for wealth management. They would review, they would analyze their own operations, and they would have their own recommendations that need not or could be approved by their own line directors.
All right, now this is the slow, long hop that you can hit for 6. How important is customer satisfaction to Republic Bank?
Very important.
Okay. How would you rate that satisfaction now?
Well, it's not how I rate it. As I mentioned, we do annual surveys. And there are 2 sets of annual surveys which are done, but so we do annual surveys twice a year, and we evaluate the bank based on the average of the 2 surveys. And the surveys are done out of a scale of 1 to 6, okay, where 6 being the highest score. For the last 2 years, Republic Bank's evaluation, and this is not done by Republic Bank but by independent survey professionals, has been 5.1.
Out of 6?
Out of 6.
Okay. I'll reserve any follow-up question on that for later on.
Member Ramadan?
Does Republic Bank think that it has a duty of care to inform customers before any fee changes?
Yes, we do.
And do you elicit responses before you make any changes? Is that the modus operandi?
Well, the duty of care is to advise the customers of any fee changes, and so we do advise the customers. In some cases, you have to give 3 months' notice. In some cases, 1 month notice. It varies. We do advise the customers.
I'll stand down for now. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Member. Now, let's return to the issue of the fees. And you said it's 7, 10, 11% of your income.
7% of income, yeah.
Yeah. What is it? What is the percentage of your profitability at it?
So it's 7% of income and it's 11% of the profitability.
11% of the profitability. Now, I'm hearing about these surveys, and I understand from what you indicated, it's done independently of Republic. But do you know what form and fashion it takes?
Yes,
Is it on the street, or is it by phone call, email, or what?
So it's actually done in the banking hall, in the banking hall,
Yes.
as the clients are leaving the bank. So, as I said, twice a year we would have this independent survey provider, and it varies, do the survey in the banking hall. So as the respective clients are leaving, they will be asked a question, and it's recorded electronically and then aggregated, and we get the overall result. We actually get the result by branch, and then it's aggregated, and you get the result by bank.
I see. But in terms of the these surveys, whoever is doing the survey chooses when it is done, correct?
When the survey is done?
Yes.
We decide when the survey is done, and we decide that the survey is done at 2 periods. The survey is done in July, and the survey is done in either January or February. We try to have a 6-month period in between the surveys. So the organization decides when the survey is done, but the survey is done randomly from the branch perspective. So the branch does not know when whoever is the particular person doing their survey will come, and the individuals would go to that particular branch on random days. So if we have to get 100 individuals per branch, unless the survey is being done in July, they might go on a Monday, then they go back on a Wednesday, they go random days.
I get you. Do you have available to this committee an example sheet of the questions that are posed in a survey?
No, I would not have worked with that.
No, well, could you make it available to us?
Yeah, we could make it available.
I'm most grateful. Now, because I do have to leave very shortly, let me get this quite clear, that the fee structure is discretionary.
Yes.
And that you have taken a decision that you're not going to interfere with it to keep your profitability at a certain level, is it?
The decision, as I said, was not necessarily to keep the profitability at a certain level. The decision really is from a cost recovery perspective, the cost of providing the various services.
Yeah.
Because we make decisions to introduce products and or services free of charge whenever a new product or service is being introduced, depending on the nature of the product or service. And as I said, over the last 2 years, the new products and services that we have introduced, which have been the internet banking and the mobile banking solutions, have all been introduced free of charge for the most part.
Chair, if you just permit me this, but I do know structurally the banks, the older ones in particular, in terms of the facilities for washrooms and so. Tell us a little bit about what Republic has been doing to assist, especially the old or some of the.
So your point about the older branches is a quite relevant one. I mean, it's very difficult with some of the legacy infrastructure that we have to retrofit those branches. I mean, anyone who has gone into any of the newer buildings that the Republic Bank has constructed would see that the newer buildings are being constructed with the public washroom facilities and with the access for the differently abled. Insofar as the older buildings are concerned, if there's any renovation work being done, such as when we did Diego Martin recently, we will actually retrofit it. If there's no renovation work being done, any client who needs access to public facilities are usually escorted by the bank staff, right, behind the counter into the private areas to actually access the facilities. And we intend to continue that. So as we retrofit or renovate some of the older buildings, or as we construct new buildings, we will then make the public washroom and ensure that we have the ramps for the access for the differently abled.
Thank you very much, Chair.
I just want to ensure that the questions are shared equally amongst banks. So question to FCB. Could you perhaps expand or, in fact, give your input on the question of Member Ramadar? How important is customer satisfaction to you, and what are some of the efforts you have made over time to ensure that your customers are satisfied?
Sure. So customer satisfaction is, of course, very important. All of the banks are in the service industry. They compete on the basis of customer satisfaction. And I think the important point is that we try to offer as wide a range of products with differentiated cost structure depending on the product set to suit the different clients. With respect to the question from the member, I did go back and review, and the last time that we did a review of our fee structure was in January 2015. We've not done any substantial changes in fees for the last 2 years. In May 2016, we introduced some fees, but those were fees based on new types of accounts. So we saw at that point in time requests from customers for different currency accounts. So we saw requests for Canadian accounts and Euro accounts, etc. And we brought fees for those accounts in line with fees that already existed for US dollar accounts. Outside of that, there have been no substantial changes in First Citizens fee structure since January 2015.
Perhaps you could tell us a bit about, as well as any complaints you may have had as it relates to your facilities. And I know the member for the representative of RBL would have spoken about renovations being taking place. Could you inform us, has there been any such renovations to FCB's premises, and could you tell us about the locations perhaps?
Well, I think it's the same position as we have across the banking industry. The infrastructure in place in the branches have been there for a fairly extensive period of time. We've not done any new branches in Trinidad and Tobago, I think, for the last 2 years. But we are embarking on a process of renovation, actually 5 branches across the country, including 2 in Tobago, one that's in Princesstown that is going to get redone on the basis of a fire that we had last year. And we are looking at a new location that we are negotiating currently for Separia, as well as an upgrade of the Diego Martin, the Westcourt branch, and all of the new infrastructure is taking into account providing the facilities, which includes facilities for handicapped, as well as trying to provide retrofitted facilities for bathroom facilities where it's feasible.
So at present, what percentage of your facilities can provide services or facilities for the elderly, for handicapped individuals, bearing in mind that you charge a substantial fee, I think, for teleservices?
Well, what we do for the elderly and the handicapped is when they come into the branches, we actually proactively take them out of the lines and put them to sit and try to deal with them. And in fact, if they cannot come into the branches, we go out, which is not something that we really would prefer to do. We go out into the car park and try to deliver the services to them. With respect to how many of the branches right now have the entry facilities for handicapped, I don't know off the bat. I don't know.
I think generally the statement is that we try to facilitate in all the branches, but it'll be to different degrees. So in the ones where we could have retrofitted ramps, that has been done. In some of the older buildings where it's a little bit more engineeringly difficult to do, we find ways to assist the handicapped to get the service to be provided. The elderly definitely are taken care of in all our branches. We try to give them as much comfort as possible.
And it relates to, for instance, restroom facilities, because someone is coming to a bank and he's charged, to say, $3, for instance, for a tele fee. He wants to use the restroom. What does he do? He's paying for a service. He's actually paying for it. But I don't think he's that concerned about just simply withdrawing or depositing his money. There are other services that he may need to access. So could you tell us?
Well, okay, so let's start with, First Citizens isn't charge a teller fee. And all deposit transactions at our branches are free of charge. With respect to withdrawals, I think there are different fees that are based on different accounts, but certainly in branch withdrawals, every account that we have allows 1 free withdrawal in branch per month. With respect to facilities, as my deputy CEO would have said, we try to deal with the facilities based on the infrastructure that we have available to us. We retrofit where we can. Certainly some of our branches do have the ramps to allow for handicapped members, and we adopt the same approach. I think it's an approach across the banking sector. Anyone who needs to use washroom facilities, they will be escorted to the washroom facilities that are available to staff so that they can use those. And we make extra efforts with respect to retirees and the elderly to pull them out of the lines and to treat with them separately.
Perhaps my colleague from FCB could weigh in on that question. Republic Bank.
It will be exactly the same situation at Republic Bank. You know, we try to treat certain categories of clients, right, with the kind of empathy that we know is necessary. And as Karen indicated, the elderly and the differently abled will fall squarely in that category, as well as maybe individuals with young children, babies, mothers with children in arms. So they will always be treated differently.
So is it fair to say that there is access toilet facilities for the elderly, for handicapped persons?
Yeah, so that's what I mentioned. I mean, in the cases where the buildings don't have the public washroom facilities, okay, we will actually escort them behind the counter, you know, to access the facilities.
Thank you very much. I must take you very shortly, and for full disclosure, I pose the questions first to Republic, but they equally apply to FCB. The reason I do that is, in fact, I appeared in an ad for FCB some time ago, so there should be no indication of any favoritism here. So, Chair, thank you very much for that opportunity.
Ms. Darbesi, it's only fair that we ask you the same question that we asked to Republic Bank, which is how do you rate your customer satisfaction, and what measure or what methodology do you use to determine that?
We also have an independent provider that does independent surveys for us, and the reports are above satisfactory. We are, of course, aim for excellent, and I don't have with me the specifics of the questions, but it's done on random basis to a variety of customers that span a scale of retail, commercial, and corporate customers.
Is it a similar in-bank kind of thing, or is there something more scientific that is used?
It's a combination. So it's surveys that go out as well as interviews of customers that walk into the branch. I think we are also embarking on mystery shopper type experiences across the banking products so that we get literally persons who come in and experience it for themselves and can give specific feedback to us so that we can improve the quality of service that we offer.
Okay. Do you think that the feedback you're getting is accurately representative of the real feeling of the public?
Well, we can only assume that the feedback we're getting is accurate because it's across a wide cross-section of the public. It is man in the street, as I said. It crosses the retail, the commercial, the corporate customer base. So yes, I do think the feedback is representative. It's done on a random basis. It's done as far as we can on a statistical basis so that it pulls a sufficient sample of the customers, and it's done on a regular basis as well.
Is it ongoing or is it periodic?
I think it's done on an annual basis.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
It's not ongoing or periodic to say that it's targeted. It's on an annual basis.
Well, how just to give a little bit more color. So we have, if you want to look at it, two different layers of how we try to get the climate of the customer. There is the detailed annual survey, which doesn't necessarily happen at the end of the financial year, but during the financial year. And then also we have what we call our pulse of the customer, where there is a mechanism we have in branch to receive feedback from customers, and that feedback comes in different ways, both in terms of the quality of the service they received at the time and also suggestions for improvement on the service. And so that pulse is taken every week and it's collated, and we try to learn from it as we go along throughout the financial period.
I should have mentioned that because the results of the in-branch suggestion box and survey is tabled to the senior management team of the organization on a monthly basis as well.
Okay. This question goes to both Republic Bank and for citizens. Individually, of course, because BAT has made it clear that you all operate as discrete entities, and we understand that. Is there a move to, I don't want to say discontinue, but move away from teller services? And I'll give you the context. I'm asking that because I've gotten a sense, because you pass the typical bank now, you see people lining up these very, very long lines all throughout the day, and you're asking, how is it that these lines are so long? And you get the sense that the number of tellers available at any given time is somehow reduced. Is there a philosophy which says that we need to push more people into using online and e-services and have less people using that face-to-face telling service?
Let me start with that one. There is not a move to push people into online services. There's a move to introduce different channels that are appropriate to different people. I think we recognize that in our society, we have a broad demographic that spans geography as well as age, and we're trying to provide differentiated services for differentiated clients. There is not a move on behalf of First Citizens to reduce teller services. We have not reduced the number of teller wickets that we have in our branches. I think the issue, member, is it is very difficult for any service organization to put staffing in place for peak periods 100% of the time, and that becomes the difficulty. So I would say that the experience that we have had is that at certain times of the month that the lines are longer, and we do try, and they are longer in certain branches, and we do try to provide more facilities or more teller facilities or more customer service facilities and actually have a roving customer service representative who goes into the lines and pulls out people and asks, is there something that we can help you with? Perhaps you can do this transaction through the ATM. The ATM is literally in the branch rather than line up to do the withdrawal. So we try to be proactive, but there is not a move on behalf of First Citizens to reduce the number of tellers or the number of tellers that we have in branches. We, of course, encourage our customers as far as they can to use the different channels, because to be honest, there are some people, I think it was the previous member who indicated, who because of their particular disposition will want to use the branch services, and there are others who are very happy to use the online services. And it's our job to really provide the full range, and we think over time things will move into an online electronic mobile device type mode, but we are not in a position where we are pushing people outside branches. What we do experience difficulty with, as I think any service organization does, is it is literally impossible to provide the staff all throughout the month for the peak periods. So we try to supplement it by providing the roving agents and pulling people out the lines and literally trying to ask them, is there something we can help you with? Can you use another, an alternative? Is there something, and especially for the aged and the differently abled.
Okay. Mr. Batiste, your take on it?
Sorry. The challenge that we continuously pose to ourselves is how do we improve the convenience and the accessibility of our services to our clients. So if there's a move afoot, it is really a move to see how we can improve that. Online and mobile banking are not ends in themselves, they are means to an end. And they are means that are meant to give our clients, right, 24/7 access to the services. And like online and mobile banking are means to an end, there are other means to an end. So that over the 100-odd years that we have been involved in banking, or however many years that any bank has been involved, what we have come to understand is that there are different needs that clients have when it comes to banking services. In the case of teller services, the challenge really, and there from a client perspective, is the access to their cash. But the clients are not accessing cash for the sake of accessing cash. They're really accessing cash as a means to another end. And so all of the banks, Republic Bank included, we have really invested heavily in the technology and the reliability so the clients, rather than accessing the cash, could use alternative channels. I'm sure the members would be aware, or members, if they are old enough, would be aware of the days prior to the investment by the banking system in the creation of a links network, where clients could actually go to any client, any ABM, of any bank, and use their piece of plastic to withdraw cash, or they could go to any merchant without having to wonder who the merchant was actually banking with, and use the same piece of plastic. The banks have really sought to see how we could improve the accessibility and the convenience. So we're not moving clients away from the tellers, but we see that there are so many alternative channels and alternative options that would improve convenience. Okay. Karen made reference to the difficulty with staffing for peak. That difficulty is really compounded not just by the time of the month, but by the time of the day. Because most of the peak, tends to occur, during the same lunch hours that our clients, want to be able to access their cash. But those also coincide with the lunch hours that our staff have to avail of. So there's always that extra difficulty. And so our move is to say, how could we reduce, as I said, the inconvenience? How could we improve the accessibility? And that's what we've been doing.
Okay. Just to provide a counter-narrative, Mr. Batiste, would you still acknowledge that for thousands of people in this country, banking is still a relationship? Now, I don't see it that way. To me, it's just a money transaction. But there are many people, and I'm not talking just people who are not technologically savvy, some people who are very savvy, but for whom banking is a relationship. And going to the bank and talking to the teller and knowing the teller's name and going to the same teller is part of their modus operandi.
Agreed. Yeah. I would acknowledge that.
Okay. Thank you.
Question to FCB, RBC. You would have stated earlier that there's no teller fee in First Citizens Bank. However, I'm looking at your website and I see here that there's one free branch withdrawal, and thereafter there's an additional withdrawal fee of $5. Effectively, some would say that is a teller fee. Would you agree?
Clarify to say that we have no fee for deposits on any of our accounts, and one free in-branch withdrawal, and a fee for subsequent in-branch withdrawals, but withdrawals can also be done at the ATMs, which are conveniently located in each and every branch at a substantially reduced cost. So there are alternative channels that as we continue to provide different mechanisms for clients to access the branches.
And would you say that $5 is a reasonable fee for whether it be first or second for anyone to withdraw?
It's $5 if you withdraw the teller, and if you go to the ATM, that will probably be literally 25 feet away from the teller, it's 85 cents. So again, it's differentiated based on the cost of providing the service.
Sure. And Mr. Batiste?
I'd agree with Karen. I think it varies. It varies by product. In Republic Bank's case, like for Citizens, we have a number of different products with different structures, right, that give you different amounts of free transactions. And that's one of the reasons why most of the banks have also invested heavily, right, in trying to see how we could guide our clients into their selection of accounts. So as to whether $5 or $3 or $8 is an appropriate fee, it really depends on the particular institution's cost structure and the alternative that they've made available.
So is $3 a reasonable fee based on your cost structure for the withdrawal of money, of someone's own money from your bank?
I'll tell you, if it was Republic Bank, I would probably say yes, because the cost structure associated with the transactions are quite high, much higher than $3.
So what is the average time, in an average hour, how many persons withdraw, do you say, or use teleservices, such that a fee, the teller fee is charged? Could you indicate per teller how many transactions they might?
I wouldn't have that information off the top of my head.
That might be pretty costly or pretty profitable, I would say. Member?
Mr. Batiste, of course it is your view that that is justified, and we cannot, I mean, we could argue with that, but it will not affect your perception of it. But how then do you justify that when the given customer gets 0.1% of an interest on their money? It seems imbalanced.
Okay, so it's a separate issue that we're talking about when we come to the actual interest rate that is paid on deposits. And so if you want to talk a little bit about the interest rate that's paid on deposits, we need to understand the context within which that operates. And the context within which interest rates are determined for various deposits. First of all, across the banks, we compete heavily for deposits, depending on our respective liquidity situations. And the overall interest rate structure for the banking system depends on the overall liquidity situation in Trinidad and Tobago. So right now, you're probably correct. The interest rate on some deposit products could be down probably 0.25%. Okay, there are other products that might offer you 1% or 1.25%, and there are alternative products offered through various other mediums that give you different rates. But if you look back 5, 6, 7 years, you will see a different cost structure for deposits. And if you ask what has happened during that intervening period of time, it really is a question of liquidity. And the liquidity in the financial system in Trinidad and Tobago has been such that when you look at what the banks, the options available to the banks in terms of use of the funds, they really did not support maintaining deposit rates at the kind of levels that they were 5, 6, 7 years ago. So there's a different decision-making process when it comes to the interest rate that is paid on deposits.
Academically, I understand that. Intellectually, I understand that. But as a customer, to me, it's not two separate issues, it's one issue. It seems remarkably unfair that when I opened an account, I was assured of X, and then I'm getting a very, very small fraction of X, and I check your quarterly when you announce your profits. So my 2 cents is not going anywhere, but your 2 cents seems to be ever expanding. And as a customer, it doesn't seem to be any kind of parity. So they are intellectually two separate issues, but to me as a customer, they're one issue.
Which is why our biggest challenge really is an education challenge on our part. We have not done enough, and I think we recognize that. And this is we're talking at the Republic Bank level here. We have not done enough to inform the clients, okay, of why that occurs.
I know why it is.
No, I understand you know, but we're talking
I know why
about
it is,
general
but
public.
it does not prevent me from still feeling that this is remarkably and tremendously unfair. I still feel that way, even though I understand the circumstances that led to it. So what about the hundreds of thousands of people who might not understand?
Our objective is to try and ensure that our customers understand why that might be the case. Insofar as the individual feelings are concerned, I do agree with you. I mean, various people will have different feelings. I know for my own part, I have my own little challenges with certain things that happen, even though I understand, why a particular business might be doing what they're doing. So, I mean, it's very difficult sometimes to deal with the feelings. Our challenge is to try and make sure that we are as clear as possible and that we ensure as many of our customers understand. The feelings aspect of it, we will have to manage later.
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I will say it. Feelings are important, sir. Yours is a customer-based service. How your customers feel about your bank and about your practices is tremendously important to your continued success. So while it might not be able to, you can't quantify it, it is still very important, which is why I started by asking about satisfaction. It's tremendously important. It's not something that should be dealt with in any kind of a blasé manner.
And maybe I can step in here and speak, because I think the feelings feed into the level of customer satisfaction, because that is inherent to who we are as people. And I think there is a lot that individual banks and the association has recognized that we can do more to educate customers. Certainly, when you look, again, we've spoken about alternative channels for people to access services, but I think we can do more, and we have started. I don't know if you saw the ads that we have put in the newspaper, where each bank is having a customer information day where customers can come in and inquire of the fees on their accounts, and potentially discuss which accounts may be more suitable for them, because there are accounts in the institutions where if you maintain a certain level of minimum balance, your rate on your deposit is differentiated, recognizing that balance that you maintain. And I think there is a lot more that we need to do to educate people on those fronts, so that people can ensure that they get the best value for their money. Certainly when clients come into First Citizens, we offer a range of services, because we have subsidiaries within the group that offer differentiated services. So we do offer alternatives to invest in First Citizens Asset Management in a money market fund, where you have a different level of return relative to a deposit, but there is a different level of savings required. And we have as well different account structure, where depending on the minimum level of savings you leave in the account, and our minimum level starts as low as $500, you have differentiated rates of return on the account. So I think there is more that we've recognized, that the feeling is a lot of it based on us providing more information so that customers can make informed decisions.
I just want to turn the conversation back a bit to the issue of fees in particular. Now, it was posited here earlier that the teller generally costs about $5 or charges about $5, and I know that's about $3 in the case of Republic Bank, and I think $5 per extra withdrawal after the first free in terms of FCB. We've also stated that the ABM machines, the charge there, it's about 75 cents. That's for if you use your own ABM or ABM facility to which your card is issued. However, if you use an ABM machine that is from a different bank, the charge is $4. Could you all explain to the listening public why that, the reason for that large cost or charge differential?
The reason for the differential, and I will try to explain it going back to the example I gave earlier when I said that maybe some members would recall when prior to having a network, what we call the links network, okay, which facilitated banks to use any other bank's ABM or any other bank's client's point of sale machine, okay, it was always a one-on-one relationship between you and your bank. So you could have used your debit card, let's say, in your bank's machine, and so life moved on that way. When the links network was implemented, okay, and this infrastructure was put in place behind, there then became 3 players to every transaction. There became the bank, who would have issued the particular card. There is the network, through which the exchange is facilitated. And then there is the other bank, which would be the other bank who owned the ABM or the other bank who owned the point of sale client. And so if you look at the fee associated with use of another bank's ABM, there are 3 portions to that fee. There's one that deals with your bank, there's one that deals with the other bank, and there's one that deals with the switch, which is what we call the switch, which is the links network in between. So that is the reason why you will find that differential.
In my own research, because I've done a bit of research on this particular point, I've lived in the United Kingdom for some time. And in the United Kingdom, 98% of all ATM machines give you free cash withdrawals. That is not so in Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, in 1994, if I'm not mistaken, the links or the service was began offering in Trinidad and Tobago. Incidentally, the English equivalent is something called link. So it's links and link. However, in Trinidad and Tobago, we don't have free cash withdrawals. In fact, there's little or no apparent interconnectivity based on the fees of which you are charging, whereas in England, there is almost free cash withdrawals. And you said earlier that there, in a previous hearing, that there's no collusion or almost competition, well, there is a large degree of competition between banks. But there is a joint venture organization by the name of Infolink Services Limited, which is effectively, as I understand, an institution that is made up of banks. I think the 4 major banks are the major shareholders, and there is some licensees who are the most recent banks to this jurisdiction. However, there doesn't seem to be any involvement or shareholding or participation of, for instance, credit unions. In the United Kingdom, there's building societies. So I want to find out about this institution called Infolink Services Limited. It's not regulated. In the United Kingdom, such things could not happen. In fact, it is regulated by, I think, the Act, the Banking Act, Section 184, 2009. But in this country, there is no regulation. Could you explain to us about the mechanisms and why this institution, which appears to be operating in a financial, in the financial services industry, is not regulated, and if that you believe has some impact in the fees that ABM machines have been able to charge in this country since 1994?
That is unfortunately a very difficult question to respond to, because the entity to which you refer is a private entity. Okay, so its information is not publicly available.
But it's made up of the banks, yes?
So the 4 banks, right, who actually in 1994, well, probably maybe the only bank that existed, I'm not sure, but the 4 banks were the ones who actually established this institution.
Right.
And the initial investment was these 4 banks, and that's where the ownership, okay, are the 4 banks that you're referring to. But it is a private company, and so I'm really not at liberty, right, to disclose this private information. With respect to the regulatory environment for Infolink, I do really believe that's probably a better question for the regulator. What I'm aware of, because I was around when Infolink was being established, is that it was a result of a very, very collaborative effort, which did include the regulator at the time. In fact, the regulator was very keen that such an institution be established, because it was seen as a mechanism that would actually move Trinidad and Tobago's payment system forward.
But is it a fact that this institution's major shareholders are the 4 major banks in Trinidad and Tobago?
That is a fact.
And is it a fact that credit unions, because it was posited at the last hearing that somehow credit unions were substitutes for banks in Trinidad and Tobago, which they are, I do not believe they are. Are credit unions members, and are they allowed free access into this Infolink Services Limited?
It would not be free access. I believe there might be 1 or 2 credit unions that actually, through the same licensee mechanism that you made reference to, that would actually be licensees, and so they would be issuers of cards that can then be used on the through the Links network, but it would not be all credit unions.
And do you think that this institution should be regulated in the same way it is regulated in the United Kingdom?
So if you're asking my opinion on it, my opinion on it would be no. That the existing arrangement currently works very efficiently for Trinidad and Tobago.
Even though it's the costs to the consumer. You see, the concern I have is that this debate, there's a large debate, and as someone in the banking sector, you would be familiar that there have been several reforms and several proposed reforms. In fact, in January this year, there was a big furore between banks in the Links system in the United Kingdom, where proposals were made and for the adjustment in the way these banks operate the system. And in fact, the burden of the costs of the system is actually borne by the banks in the United Kingdom, so there's no actual cost to the consumer. The problem with having such high charges in ABM machines is that there's no differentiation for whether or not the ABM machine is located in a low-income territory, for instance, Beetham, or whether or not it's in a high-income area, for instance, in West Moorings. So the banks, you say that they are concerned with the poor man in the street, the man of the low-income bracket. But really and truly, ABM machines, there's no differentiation that takes into account persons' different circumstances. So is that really benefiting consumers? Is that not a problem for consumer welfare in Trinidad and Tobago?
But I think it would be a problem for consumer welfare if we ignore the fact that, notwithstanding the existence of the links network, okay, and the ability of any individual bank's customer to therefore use another bank's ABM, if we ignore the fact that each bank has nevertheless been expanding their own ABM network. So that while Republic Bank could say, okay, fine, well, you know, I have 80 ABMs, and my clients could go and use the ABM of any other bank and pay $4, you know, and so be it. That has not been the situation for Republic Bank. Republic Bank every year expands the number of physical ABM presences that we have. And part of our reason for doing that is so that, in fact, our clients, and I go back to the point about accessibility and convenience, our clients, in fact, I mean, we have over 120-something ABMs. Okay, part of the reason for doing that is that our clients actually do not have to use another bank's ABM unless there's some absolute emergency that can't be covered for one reason or the other. And I think every bank has been expanding their ABM network.
Would you be willing to provide to this committee how much interbank interconnected services that are accessed by members of your bank?
I mean, as I said, I think when we had the private hearing, okay, I really would be willing to provide any information that is already in the public domain, because Republic Bank is still a listed entity. Right, and we do have to have confidentiality considerations. But if it is something that is already in the public domain, I will have no objection whatsoever to providing it.
Okay, Member Rambarat and then Member Francis.
Thank you very much. I'll just focus on three categories. The first is credit card. Now, on the last occasion, we spoke to the Bankers Association. I just want to make sure that you're familiar with the submission of the Bankers Association. And on the last occasion, there was some discussion on credit cards, and the point was made that credit cards are unsecured, an unsecured form of lending. Now, I want to ask you about the delinquency levels with respect to credit cards, whether the charges for the use of credit cards fully cover the delinquency. And third, are these banking fees outside of the credit card charges, are these banking fees in any way being used to offset rising delinquency on credit card payments?
Sorry, so maybe let me start. The credit card charges have not been increased in the bank. They are there, and the earnings are based on volumes of transactions. And I think one thing that didn't come across when we met as a Bankers Association, credit cards are unsecured debt in the banks, on the bank's balance sheets. So it's unsecured debt for the consumer. But credit cards also provide a fairly long period of interest-free an interest-free period when you access the credit card. And I think Nigel actually did a very good job of explaining this, I think, at a chamber meeting that we attended this week. If you have a credit card, and let's assume, for example, the statement is run on the 15th of the month, and the payment date is, let's say, the 2nd of the next month. So let's assume we use May, and the card statement is run on the 15th of May, and your payment is due on the 2nd of June. Then credit card transactions that you do from the 16th of May will not get caught on your statement until the 15th of June, and will not then be due for payment until the 2nd of July. So that period from the 16th of May to the 2nd of July is actually free credit that the banks are using to provide to credit card customers. So I think that is something as well that is not very well known in any market. Is credit card delinquency increasing? Of course, we are seeing increases in people extending payment terms. I think that is something that is across the society. Have we increased credit card charges? No, we've not.
The specific question is, on the third part, is whether the fees, these things, this inquiry is about commercial banking fees. whether the fees go into a pool and part of that is being used. The credit cards have introduced a different level of risk. They're unsecured. I don't think I need a survey to say that a significant proportion of your credit card customers go beyond the interest-free period and enter into a period where the debt continuously rolls over. I could be corrected, but that is my understanding of the way the society operates with credit cards. Is it that the rising delinquency has brought an increased risk to the banking sector in relation to its ability to recover, since this is unsecured debt? And that rising risk is being offset by the pool that is created by increased banking fees across the board.
Okay. So there's no correlation whatsoever between the fees on credit cards and rising delinquency. I mean, there are essentially two fees associated with credit cards. One is...
Say which right away I could tell you generates my concern. If there's no correlation between the fees on credit cards and rising delinquency, it means that the cost of credit card does not take into account the risk. Because if I am offering a credit card service and I see rising delinquency, then I would offset that risk on the fees side. But if you're saying there's no correlation, it means that there is something else providing the opportunity to offset the risk, and I'm asking whether it is the pool of fees generated on all services.
Okay, so if I get a chance to complete, I will try to clarify. So there's no correlation between the fees that are paid, earned, charged on credit cards, right, and the rise in delinquency. And I was going on to say that there are two fees associated with credit cards. There's the annual membership fee, and without fear of contradiction, I don't think that has changed in, at least from a public bank perspective, he would not be a fee that changed in the last 3 years. He has been there for 10 years maybe. And then there are the fees that are associated with the use of the card, which are merchant commission fees. And these are fees that are shared really and truly, and I don't want it to be too complicated, but these are fees that are shared between the bank who might have issued the card, the bank who might be the banker for the merchant, and in the case of the credit cards, the Visa and or MasterCard networks, which are the equivalent for credit cards to the Links network. So that is what determines the fee structure. And in the case of the fees for credit cards, so the membership fees have not changed, but the merchant commission fees have actually lowered over the last, certainly in the last 5 years, the merchant commission fees have lowered. To go to your question about the rise in delinquency, I think the correlation, if there's any, is between the delinquency, the risk associated with the fact that they are unsecured, which is what resulted in the delinquency, and the interest rate on the credit cards. And the fourth variable in that correlation is what Karen just explained in terms of the interest-free period with the cards. So when you talk about what takes into consideration the fact that there is this rise in delinquency on the credit cards, which I would say, quite frankly, in the case not necessarily of all banks, is we haven't quite seen the extent of the rise that you might anticipate with the economic circumstance. But what is meant to take that into consideration is the actual interest rate on the credit card. So the interest rate takes into account the delinquency, the risk associated with the fact that it is unsecured, the interest-free period.
The second area I want to look at is I'm going to the submissions by the Bankers Association. I found the suggestions to be very interesting and should be taken into account in our report. But I want you to talk, there's one I'm familiar with, which is the need to proclaim the remaining sections of the Electronic Transactions Act. want you to talk about that. But the one that I'm not too familiar with is this issue of agency banking legislation. And it's been put forward as a means of dealing with rural communities. I just want you to, on behalf of your respective banks, your views on what the proclamation of the remaining sections of the Electronic Transactions Act would do to the customer experience. And I know here you're talking about online in particular, but I don't know the impact it would have on persons who do not bank online. And then the second one is in this issue of the agency banking legislation.
The proclamation of the remaining sections of the Electronic Act, okay, really is not so much to do with the online banking, although it is meant to facilitate one aspect. Okay, it really is more to do with the processing of checks. You know, checks and the processing of checks has been a major source of concern for our clients, particularly the duration of time it takes to clear a check. Basically, I hope that's not too confusing. So the idea really and truly, or the suggestion, and it is included in the Act, right, would facilitate, okay, the electronic clearing of these checks, so that we will find ourselves in a situation where the banks are now able to electronically exchange the items. Clients will be able, and this is where the online banking or the mobile banking might come in, clients will be able to take images of their check and remotely send these to their banks, who will then be able to process the images electronically. As it is right now, we have to process all of that manually. So every day, somebody from Karen's office, somebody from my office will go down to the central bank and meet up with the other 6 banks and exchange the items physically. So that is the main driver behind wanting to have those remaining sections enacted or passed. With respect to the...
Before you move on to agency legislation, just to complete that point, what was the resistance, or what in your mind, what was the reason it wasn't fully proclaimed?
I don't know.
I think anybody in the banks are aware as to the reason why only part of the act was proclaimed. But just to emphasize the point on the clearing, allowing a customer, when they present a check or deposit a check in their account, this is really going to facilitate them seeing their money and being able to use their money much more quickly, because literally, depending on the time of the day you deposit the check, it doesn't actually go through the clearing process until the following day. And that is how the time actually builds up into the 2 to 4 days that's in the system right now. So it will give people better access and more ready access to their own funds. And that's what the Bankers Association has been pushing for. In addition, of course, to allowing us to present new products, which I think a lot of clients are saying, you know, I see this thing on television where you can take a picture of your check and you get it deposited. We can't do that because in our environment, images are not considered a legal offer for us to consider for clearing.
Could I turn the discussion slightly back?
Okay. So the idea behind the agency banking legislation was actually to make it easier and more cost-effective for banks to establish operations in some of the remote locations. Because at least in jurisdictions where we are familiar, there's agency banking legislation, you know, all of the infrastructure and all of the regulatory requirements which drive cost, right, associated with the opening of a branch of a bank are absent. So that it is possible, for argument's sake, and actually if we go back many years, there was a kind of agency banking in Trinidad many years ago when you know, someone, and it happened quite frankly in Tobago, where you could have actually had a large retailer or a merchant really that was acting as an agent of a commercial bank. And so therefore this person, under the auspices of the commercial bank, you know, would have all the different infrastructure in place, but we would not, the commercial bank would not have to establish an actual branch, put in a physical vault, do all of the various things that actually come with a full bank. Because what you did is that you appointed an agent in a community. Of course, we will have the different guidelines as to who could be an agent and what have you. But the idea was that. Actually to reduce the cost of providing some kind of physical presence in some of the remote locations.
Yeah, I was asking that on behalf of Moruga and Guayari and Toco.
There isn't a bank or an ATM in my entire constituency. It's one of the second or third largest in the country. And there is no banking presence at all, not even an ATM. So I was happy that you asked the question.
I just want to return the discussion back to the actual question of level of fees for services. I have here from First Citizens Bank website schedule of services and fees. For instance, closing an account within 3 months attracts a cost of $30. A statement of account other than a regular cycle costs $25. An uncollected checkbook or one-time flat fee if not collected after 2 months. In order to destroy a small charges is cost, or the person is charged $47. For a large, it's $95. And that's for sundry charges. On current accounts, uncollected checkbooks to be destroyed costs $50 and $100 for large checkbooks. Stop payments cost $30 per item. And another one that struck me is that an ATM card maintenance fee of $10 is charged. These charges seem quite out of the ordinary. In fact, they don't seem, I'm not aware of the bank's cost structure, but it appears a bit remarkable that, to destroy a checkbook would cost so much, and that there would be such charges for closing an account within 3 months of opening. Surely the marginal cost on that is almost zero. A teller probably could do it. Could you perhaps explain to us some of these apparently supernormal charges that that FCB is charging these customers?
Well, I think you have to split it with different categories because there were many different things that you covered there. Let's start with closing an account within 3 months. The issue is not the closing of the account, it's the fact that the due diligence and the work to open the account, as you would know, is fairly extensive. And really what we're trying to prevent is people opening an account and not using it and then closing it prematurely. The bank invests a lot of time and effort in due diligence for opening accounts. And once the account is open, we have an annual requirement as part of the Know Your Customer to maintain up-to-date documentation and to store those documents. So the charge is meant to be a recovery cost of the opening of the account charge as opposed to a cost to close the account. With respect to the destruction of checks, if you order checks, and we hold them in the bank, we have a physical storage cost for, you could imagine what it is to store 500 checkbooks in a limited space in a branch. There is a cost to all of these services, hold, mail, etc., have a storage cost associated with it in a branch facility. And it's tracking it and keeping account of whose facilities are there. So it's meant to be, as all of the charges are, recovery costs for services that we provided.
And the statement of account, you said it's charged $25.
Statement of accounts are available online, free of charge, that you can print and download yourself. I mean, First Citizens made a conscious decision as part of our promotion of trying to be environmentally friendly to make all statements available online. We still make them available if you do need a physical statement printed, and the charge for that is $25. But certainly, every customer has access to go online, access their statement, and print it free of charge.
Tanti, who is 50 years old, who doesn't go online, has never been online, she has to go incur this cost $25 every time she wants to check if her pension statement, that pension is going to...
And it's interesting that you bring the retirees into account. We actually do update accounts, the physical statement books for all of our retirees once they come to the counter as part of the service that we offer. So that when you come to the counter to do a transaction for retirees, we update their books at the counter, which negates the need for a physical statement because all of your transactions are updated and that's free of charge.
But surely the cost of printing something that is already available electronically is not $25, yes? Can be.
Physically, there's the cost of maintaining it, there's paper costs, there's mailing out costs, there is all sorts of costs that are associated. We're trying to provide options for people to access their own information themselves. And as I said, we've made a specific effort with retirees, and we update every retiree's passbook as they come to do a transaction at the counter.
Okay, well, tell me about the ATM maintenance fee of $10. Tell me about that.
That one I'm actually not familiar with, so I would have to go back and check. An ATM maintenance fee?
Yes, it says ATM card maintenance fee of $10.
Could you tell me which account you're looking at?
Yeah, it just says ATM services. I got it online at fees and charges in First Citizens Bank, that tab. In any event, I will...
Our ATM fee is 85 cents for withdrawal. I'm not aware that there is an ATM maintenance charge that's applied to a customer, but I will check it and see.
Great. And what about the deposit of empty envelope that costs $30? Why is that $30?
Sorry?
If you deposit an empty envelope at an ATM, why does that cost you $30? Why is it a fee of $30 charged?
Why would you deposit an empty envelope and have our customer service representatives collecting the envelopes, opening it, trying to reconcile if the slip was not in the envelope and got loose, and have to reconcile and do an audit back to it? There is a cost. If we get an empty envelope, we have to literally go through to ensure that the slip didn't come out of the envelope, reconcile the entire batch, envelope to envelope, and that there is a cost associated to that.
Is it cost
why would someone want to deposit an empty envelope? The risk of fraud, because that could be an avenue on which someone is perpetuating a fraud, which is why we would take the empty envelope and go back and do a full audit of the batch of deposits within the ATM. Fraud within the system is quite endemic. And there is a cost to legitimize that, in fact, it was an empty envelope and the envelope didn't open and the slip come out and got misplaced somewhere.
All right. What new industries should commercial banks target to offer loans and financing?
What new industries?
It's a question from the Secretariat in particular. They want to know what new industries should commercial banks target to offer loans and financing, if any.
I think the commercial banks, and certainly speaking for First Citizens, target every industry segment in the country. We don't differentiate our client base. We deal with every client, from the smallest retail customer worker straight through to the largest corporate clients. As new industries go into business within the country, we will certainly target those industries for offering the full range of banking services. We are currently, and we always, as each institution, look at our product set and look at new products for existing clients. But with respect to a question as to what new industries we're targeting, as industries come on board, we will target any and all of them.
There is, on the last occasion, the central bank governor would have expressed the view that there's a perception that the financial sector is overbanked. Do you share that sentiment? And if so, why?
So I would not share that sentiment. So you want to know why I would not? No, I mean, if you look at the range of options available in Trinidad and Tobago, I know that on the last occasion, some members of the questioning team felt that there was not enough competition, right, in the financial service, and tried to maybe draw a comparison between the fact that there were 4 large banks and the degree of competition. But the more large banks there are, right, the greater the competition in any jurisdiction. If we look at the broad financial system, the financial system in Trinidad is comprised, as we said, of the 8 banks, but there are a number of other players in the financial system in Trinidad. So if you say that there should be less banks, the question is, are you further concentrating the same issue that maybe this committee is concerned about, whether or not these banks are the ones that are dictating everything, So if the view is that A does not represent enough competition, or that the fact that there are 4 large banks does not represent enough competition, then shrinking the number of banks further would not exactly enhance the situation. We are strongly of the view that there is excellent competition in this, in our financial system. I mean, Karen, myself, all the other banks, we compete for every day, for every dollar of business. We compete with the credit unions. The credit unions might not be a member of all of them may not be members of the links payment system, but the credit unions are very aggressive when it comes to actual loans in the form of, I guess, shared disbursements or whatever it's called, but a loan by any other name is still a loan, right? We compete very aggressively with the unit trust. Every single one of us, you might not call the unit trust when people deposit their units or increase the number of units, you might even call it a deposit, but a deposit by any other name is still a deposit. So I think that there is healthy competition. I don't feel there's a need for anything to be reduced. I do feel, however, that there's a need for improved regulation of some of the other players in the industry. Okay, I know there are moves afoot to try and improve the regulation of the credit unions and what have you, but I do feel that regulation, which provides security to all of the clients of all the institutions, is what we might need more of.
All right, before I move on to Member Rambarat, you say you compete in every sphere. Just for my own clarification again, does that include in the ABM services, given that there's a joint venture in this country operating without regulation? In England, there's actually a regulator for these services. There's no regulator. Do you not think that that is almost an affront to competition in this country?
But I think when you look specifically at the ATM charges, you see a wide range of charges for use even of an own bank ATM across the members who are in Infolinks. And I think just to emphasize Nigel's point, the regulator views data from a macro level. We view data on our individual banking level, and they certainly have much more data than I would have on any of my competitors. But I am also of the view, I am not of the view that the system is overbanked. I think competition is healthy. I think there are portions of our society in Trinidad and Tobago who are not as fully banked in banking services as they should be, and the more competition we have will ensure banking services gets to every member of the public of Trinidad and Tobago who wants to access banking services. Yep. But I think with respect to the question on the ATM services, I think even within the 4 members of Infolinks, or the 4 equity holders of Infolinks, because please remember that these were the 4 members who put up the initial capital for the infrastructure. There is a difference in the ATM charge for own bank ATM even amongst those members. So clearly the competition is there and it's differentiated with fees as well as with service offerings.
But every bank charges $4 to another bank, so clearly there must be some either collusion or there must be some decision, or there may be, I don't know, is there a joint venture agreement between the parties and that regulates the conduct? These are questions that the public would want to know. If there's $4 across the board, that really is not any variation or differential. In fact, that suggests that there might be some sort of price fixing,
There are service delivery levels that Infolinks has to deliver to each member bank, and there are protocols to govern the exchange of data, but there is no discussion around the charges that First Citizens would charge for its ATM. Republic would determine what charge they apply for a First Citizens customer using their ATM, and then there's an Infolinks charge that's in between for use of the infrastructure. That's how the cost structure is built up.
Okay, Member Rambarat?
And to go to the third area very quickly and just to make some observations. This is on the issue of customer service. And I listened to you on, the times when you have peak services. I wondered whether you were doing enough. You made the point about education. I wondered whether you were doing enough to bring this to the attention of the customers. The times of the day and the times of the month where you have peak demand for services, encouraging them maybe, unless it's urgent, to bank during the off-peak period. I should have premised that by saying this property tax issue and the need to sign up and all of that demonstrated that in our society there's still, largely on account of culture, people who want to have that experience, as difficult as may be, to interface with a human being and collect a piece of paper and go home with it. And again, I've always made the point that there'll always be a segment of the community that wants to walk into the bank. But do you believe you're doing sufficient to educate customers on your peak times and encourage them to bank outside of those hours? I also want to make a point on the survey. I asked the bank, I pointed to the Bankers Association, the fact that the surveys which were presented to us, the outcomes, did not reflect a question specifically on customers' view of the level of banking fees. And I wondered whether your respective surveys have ever addressed that specific question. And I want to close off by, when we had the governor of the central bank before us, you mentioned today the other players who are not regulated. And I asked the governor about the proliferation of like appliance stores, for example, that in my mind offer banking services without being regulated, to the extent to which some of them actually, their core business is in the area of finance. What are your views on the current environment in which we all operate in relation to hire purchase products?
Sorry about that. With respect to whether we are doing enough to advise our customers about the various peak times and the options with them, at a Republic Bank level, we always feel that there's more that could be done. I think many of our customers are aware of what some of the peak times are, and so they know that you don't really go at the beginning of the month because that's when you tend to have all of the pensioners. And so people intuitively or over time have realized that. In the case of Republic Bank, they're also aware that the first 10 days of the month, not necessarily a good time because that is when a lot of people are coming in to pay their credit card bill. Okay, I guess where the challenge comes in is really during the lunch hours in the regular days. So people have already self-selected and tend to try and avoid going to the bank during those days. Okay. The challenge with the lunch times, as I said, there's a conflict of the lunch times because it's your convenient lunchtime, but it's also my, as the staff member's lunchtime, and so, we have to balance that. And the banks balance it in different ways. In the Republic Bank's case, we balance it by really bringing in peak time individuals to try and cover some of that period of time, but you probably can never do enough. So the answer is no, I don't think we've done enough, and we will continue to try and do more to that specific question. With respect to the surveys, I would say yes. I don't think there should be an issue with us making the surveys available, so I will make the survey question available to the committee because, we ask the public it and it's in the hands of these independent individuals, so there's nothing secret there. But that is what actually brings the score down. Okay. The fact that if I tell you that on average we have been 5.1, 5.08 for the last 3 years, if you look at the score with respect to the cost of the services provided, you'll probably find out how that fella comes in at around 3 point something, right? or in the low 4s. So you do know that people have concerns. Right? I won't know with anger and animosity, but I do know that people would have concerns. And we just need to do more to show our clients the value proposition and also to redirect them to other channels, other products that might better suit their needs. So that's what we're trying on that score, and you'll see that for yourself when you get a copy of the survey. With respect to the other players and the level of regulation, I think we need to look at it from two perspectives. Most of the regulation in the first instance for the financial system is really geared towards protection. And the people who need the protection are the people who place their funds, who place confidence in the financial institution, and as a consequence place their funds with the institution. They might be unhappy about the way that they're being paid, but they are confident, that their money is secure. And all of the regulation of the banking sector is built around ensuring that that confidence is not misplaced, which is why you would have the capital adequacy requirements, why you would have different requirements for liquidity, a number of different requirements. Everything, all of the regulation is geared towards that. So when I talk about, more regulation, I think that we need to put more regulation where that confidence resides. You don't necessarily need to protect a borrower, because the borrower is making a decision and the borrower has not actually placed his money with the institution. If anybody needs protection, it's really the person who lent the money, because I could always decide as a borrower that I'm not paying back. Okay? From the borrower's perspective, what you want to know is make sure the interest rates are reasonable and that the interest rates are disclosed, so that people understand what the cost is. So that is one aspect of it. So if I try to maybe narrow down my answer, I would say from the appliance store's perspective, okay, once we have full disclosure of what the cost of the hire purchase is, I don't know that they would need the same level of governance and regulation that a bank has, because nobody has actually placed their money with the appliance store. What the person is doing is borrowing from the appliance store, and you want to make sure that how there's transparency in that. Just as we have had transparency in the cost of borrowing from the financial system. Again, members might recall that there were the days when the banks would have advertised and we would have like an all-in cost, and you would see 1%. But the truth is that that 1% was a kind of accumulative something, and so the real cost was actually 7% or whatever percent, right? And over time, the regulators kind of caught up and said, no, you can't put that kind of advertising out. You have to show what the total cost is or the real cost, whatever the word is. I think we need the same thing for the hire purchase, etc. And for people like the credit unions, etc., who are actually taking money from individuals, because that's where the confidence comes in. I have accepted a deposit, and what they expect is they will get it back whenever they need it back. Though they will need the greater, I think, regulation from central bank or whoever.
Okay. Final question from Dr. Francis.
One observation and then a very gimme question. Let's say if I am a customer and I'm not satisfied. This is the observation. And I'm considering wanting to change banks. Now, the chairman used a very powerful word. He said collusion. And everything we've heard through all these hearings have pointed to the fact that there is no collusion. You're all discrete entities. You all operate separately. You're competitive. But as a customer who is not happy with X bank, and I'm considering moving to Y bank, it looks to me like I'm going to face the same thing with the same thing. So whereas it's easy for us to argue on paper that you're all discrete and there is no collusion, to the customer it doesn't look like that. It looks like we're trapped in the same sector and everybody's doing the same thing, and there is no redress or no improvement anywhere. But that's just an observation. The question, very simple. Why not Saturday morning banking?
And it's not such a simple answer, because Saturday morning banking and off-hour banking requires negotiations with our staff and with our unions. And that is the most straightforward answer I can give you. And I think what we are all legitimately trying to do is to provide the services that you want to get online so that you don't need to go into a bank. But Saturday morning banking and any change of the normal hourly service that our staff are contracted to provide, I think I speak for First Citizens, and given that Republic has the same union that we do, it's a matter of negotiations with the union. Not just Saturday mornings, but even change of hours to allow shift systems to give us some more efficiency in certain areas. We have to engage in discussions with our unions.
It happens around the world. Like Thursday you have half day off, and then Saturday morning, yes, man. So, I thought they had unions too, out of Trinidad. I didn't know it was a discrete Trinidad.
And let me be very clear, we are certainly a big proponent of enjoying, and we have a very good relationship, and we discuss things with our union, and we have discussions going on with the union right now from a First Citizens perspective in introducing shift systems in different areas of the bank. It is literally, it's a discussion that you have to engage in with both the employees as well as the unions.
From our perspective, my concern with it really would be that I'm not so sure it is necessary. And I'm not going to call any names, but I'm sure the committee is aware that one of our competitors does have Saturday banking. So Republic Bank itself, we have experimented with Saturday banking. Okay, we've done Saturday banking as an experiment. We've done Saturday banking as an initiative during certain periods because we felt it would actually enable our clients, it would improve our goal of convenience and accessibility. And on every occasion that we have done it, we have been disappointed with the results. You know, in the end, all Saturday banking was really Saturday access to the teller. Okay, and all of the other services, people really didn't necessarily want that. And we as Karen kind of intimated, you know, with all of the alternatives that were available, and the fact that we have invested so heavily in the ABM network, right? We have invested so heavily in the point of sale network that you say, I mean, really to open on a Saturday, right, for people to really go by the teller, you know, is that really carrying anything forward? And so from our perspective, we have always said, you know, the value proposition to the client was not there because of the alternatives, and we've just never felt there was any need to really pursue it very, very diligently.
I will add one other point to it, and this is probably unique to First Citizens, but we have open branches on Saturday to facilitate account opening for large interest groups, in particular the URP workers, so that we can focus on that customer base and not have them adding to the long lines of other customers. And we have opened on Saturdays, as I said, for large interest groups at branches around the country to facilitate certain services. But certainly, as Nigel says, we discuss, and of course we have to look at our employees as well, and make sure that we provide alternate channels that are available for use of the customers. We have done experiments as well, extending over lunch periods and keeping the bank open extended during lunch periods, certainly at Christmas time when you see customers wanting to come in a little bit earlier, and there's been mixed response from our side.
All right, before we close, I just want to thank each and every one of you for coming out today and participating in our hearings. It was quite elucidating, edifying, and I think it will assist us greatly in furtherance of our inquiry and compiling our report. Before you leave, I would like to invite the Managing Director of RBL and the CEO of FCB to make brief closing remarks.
Well, just to say thanks for giving the opportunity to me to provide some further clarification, and hope that how it's carried us along the way. And to maybe just say that, you know, Mr. Chairman, I know that you called a number of fees for citizens, you know, and questioned the cost. And if you had done something similar, looking at the Republic Bank, you probably could ask the same questions. But, you know, I think if we want to be balanced, right, we need to also look at all the services that attract no charges. And they all have a cost. And I just go back to my opening comments. We are driven really and truly by trying to satisfy the customer. I mean, if we are unable to satisfy our customers, okay, we would not necessarily be able to survive for as long as we have survived. We have the various mechanisms in place to try and get a feel of what it is. You know, yes, nobody's ever going to be 100% happy. I can tell you the fact that how you have all of the major banks lined up right next to one another in most of the high street areas is an example of how people don't necessarily feel as though they are trapped, because every day our branch managers will report to their respective line managers, you know, this client is closing their account and moving to this particular bank, or they have won the business from a particular bank that's come across to them. What has made it a little difficult really has been sometimes the account opening requirements. That has made it a bit of a challenge, but that's really where it's right across the board. And so maybe if there was a way that we could have made that a little bit easier, but we know why that is there. But I just want to give the committee and the public who is listening to me, right, the assurance, okay, that the bank's objective really and truly is to provide the quality type of service that they expect. I don't translate that to mean that everything that the client wants that the client will get, but I do translate it to mean that on balance, the client will, right, if they have to evaluate the value proposition from the public bank, will give us at least a 5 out of 6.
And I would echo from First Citizens, thanks to the committee for inviting us in. I think the opportunity to hear the questions will be, the questions themselves are an opportunity for us to learn what the constituent members that you represent are asking, and we will take the feedback back. And I think one of the most important things that have come out to us is the need for us to communicate better with our customers so that they understand the services that we offer, and they can select the account, the service, whatever it is that is very appropriate for them. And there are different services for different demography type customers within the country, and we have to be very sensitive to that. And I think as banks we need to do more on an education exercise from that perspective. I think that one of the clear points that have come out is the banks are here to provide value for the customers, and value for the customers are not just the fees and charges, but also the protection that the customers enjoy from banking with institutions such as the ones that are represented here and the wider banking association. And we made this comment at the time that the Bankers Association came, that in the global financial crisis that took place, the Trinidad financial sector experienced very little repercussion, and that really redounded to the benefit of our depositors and our clients as a whole, and that spoke to the strength of the institutions that are represented in the banking industry in Trinidad and Tobago, and that is not something that should be discounted, because we are here to protect our clients, our depositors, and to provide a value-added service for all of our customers. So thank you for the opportunity to be part of the hearing, for allowing us to provide information, and we will take feedback into account and certainly try to incorporate it into how we evolve going forward.
And we, as a committee, would like to say thank you as well to the media and persons in the public gallery for attending and viewing and listening to us. And, this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.